A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, from Scary Stories for Sleepovers by R.C. Welch. Illustrated by Ricardo Delgado. A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. "Did you hear about last night?" Jerry asked Craig as he rushed into class before the bell. Was there another one?" asked Craig. "Yeah," said Linda from the seat in front of them. "A delivery guy. They found him in an alley." "The whole alley," added Robert with great emphasis. "What do you mean?" asked Craig, as the bell rang and kids started scrambling for their seats. "Well," said Robert, "they found an arm at one end of the alley, and by the time they walked to the other end, they had managed to find most of the rest of his body." "Robert!" The voice of Mr. Pender, the teacher, cut through the class. Robert swung guiltily around in his chair. "Sorry," he said. Mr. Pender slowly looked around the class. "All right," he said. "I suppose most of you have heard that there's been another killing." An excited buzz filled the classroom. Throughout the fall, the police had been finding the bodies of people brutally murdered. So far, 8 victims had been found. Most of the time, their bodies were slashed up so badly that they were in pieces. The story was on the news almost every night, as the police tried to find out who the killer could be. "That's what I thought," continued Mr. Pender. "Well, it's because of these deaths that I've invited a special guest here today." For a brief moment, Craig had a vision of a wild-eyed killer springing into the room with a meat cleaver. Instead, the door was opened by a young policeman. "I've asked Officer McCann here today to talk to all of you about safety. So please give him your attention." Mr. Pender turned to the policeman and gestured for him to start.
"Hoy, class," said Officer McCann.
"Hi,"
they all yelled back. "I want to talk to all you today about safety," began the policeman. "Now, I know you've probably heard lectures from your parents already, but we at the police department want everybody to keep their eyes open and be just a little more careful than usual." "Officer McCann," said Teresa in a loud voice, "do you have any clues about the Autumn Slasher?" "Well, I'm sure you understand that I can't reveal any details about the investigation. I can tell you, though, that we do have some clues to go on, and we're doing our best to put them together and catch this criminal." He walked over and hitched one leg up on the corner of Mr. Pender's desk. "But while the case is still open, it's very important for all of us to be as careful as we can. Now, how many of you can tell me what you should do if you're approached by a stranger?" Craig tuned out as the policeman lectured the class on safety. He knew all of that stuff. He had heard it from his father. He looked around at his classmates. Most of them were listening to the policeman. Some, like Jack, the new kid, seemed to be daydreaming. Jack was staring out the window, and Craig wondered what he was thinking about. Soon, Craig was lost in a daydream too. At recess, the newest murder was the big topic of conversation. "My dad says the police don't have any idea who's behind it," pronounced Bruce. "But Officer McCann said they had some clues," Teresa protested. "I think it's some kind of monster," said Jack. "I mean, who knows what kind of weird things live in the sewers and in abandoned houses." "You really think so?" asked Gina with wide eyes. "Why not?" said Jack, his voice dropping lower. "Maybe, late at night, after we're all asleep, some hideous, flesh-eating creature climbs out of the drains and goes hunting for dinner." "That's ridiculous," scoffed Craig. "Oh, yeah?" asked Jack. "Do you have a better idea?" "It's probably just some kind of psycho," answered Craig. "I agree," said Teresa. "My parents are always telling me to stay away from strangers. I've heard it at least once a day since the killing began." "Yeah, why invent some kind of stupid monster?" asked Brian. "The best thing you can do is just stay away from strangers, like Teresa said." Most of the other kids nodded. "And don't go out alone," Craig added. "Well, my dad says there are plenty of things we don't know about," answered Jack angrily. "That's right," said Anthony, jumping into the conversation. "What about all those scientific studies on ghosts and stuff like that?"
This prompted an all-out argument about monsters and ghosts and other weird things. By the time the bell interrupted their discussion, nothing was clear except that Craig and Jack each thought the other one was a jerk. The second half of the day passed by uneventfully. About halfway through class, Craig noticed Jack glaring at him, but he ignored him. He couldn't help it if Jack was mad at him. It was nothing personal. It was his fault for having such dumb ideas about monsters and stuff. When the final bell rang, the kids gathered up their books and poured out into the yard. Craig joined some of the other boys in a football game and forgot all about psycho killers for a while. He didn't leave the school until late in the afternoon. Most of the other kids had already been picked up by their parents. Some, like Anthony, were hanging around the front of the school, waiting. As Craig walked out of the yard, Anthony called to him, "You'd better hope there's no such thing as monsters." Craig ignored him. He didn't care if Anthony wanted to believe those stupid stories about ghosts and monsters. He didn't know everything, but he knew there was no such thing as flesh-eating monsters that lived in the sewers. He jerked his book bag over one shoulder. Kids like Anthony were just jealous of him because his parents didn't treat him like a kid. He was allowed to walk home from school. He didn't have to wait for his parents to pick him up like the other kids. He sighed. He also had to admit to himself that there was really no reason for anybody to be jealous of him. The only reason his parents allowed him to walk home was because they were too busy to come pick him up after school. His dad was a lawyer and almost always had to stay late at the office. His mom ran a clothing store, and her favorite complaint was that something was always coming up at the last minute. So they told Craig that he had to act like an adult. That was his dad's favorite phrase. That's why he was positive there were no such things as monsters. Adults didn't believe in that kind of stuff. But sometimes acting like an adult was hard to do, especially when that meant walking home from school alone, when there was some maniac prowling around, waiting to stick a knife into the nearest person. At the thought, he snuck a quick glance over his left shoulder. The street was empty. He snorted and turned forward. He really had stayed at school longer than he should have. Now he was about halfway home and nighttime was creeping in. The truth was, he had forgotten that it was getting dark a little bit earlier every day. One by one, the streetlights flickered and burned on. He was walking down a long street, lined by closed shops and black windows. He was trying not to think about the darkening sky when he heard something behind him. Trying not to look scared, he casually glanced over his shoulder. His breath caught in his throat. What was that? He stopped and stared down the street behind him. Nothing moved, but hadn't he just seen a shadowy figure duck into the doorway of one of the shops? His heart kicked into high gear. He turned around and started walking faster. In the back of his mind, he thought that he still had to act casual. He had to act like nothing was wrong. That way, somehow, nothing would be wrong. Like his dad always said, act like a victim and you'll be a victim. He straightened his shoulders and held his head up. He darted another look behind him. He saw nothing, but he could feel someone watching him. He walked a little faster, his breath whistling in and out between his teeth. His eyes anxiously scanned both sides of the street. He searched up ahead of him for an open shop, a welcome glimmer of light that meant there was a phone inside to use, a place where he wouldn't have to act like an adult. Then he heard it, the soft scrape of a footstep behind him. He whirled around, but the street was still deserted. His heart began pounding painfully. He forgot about acting like a victim and broke into a run. His book bag thudded against his shoulder as he raced down the street. Why did everything in this stupid town close so early? There was not another person in sight. Now he was sure he could hear footsteps behind him. This time he was too afraid to look back. He tried to run faster. Suddenly, a side street appeared. Without thinking, he ducked around the corner and ran into someone. He screamed as he and the stranger both stumbled and fell. "Jeez, what are you trying to do, kill me?" a familiar voice angrily shouted. Craig looked up in disbelief. Picking himself off the ground was Jack. "What's the matter with you?" Jack demanded. "I think he's after me," Craig gulped in air. Who? The killer! I think he's behind me! Jack looked around in fear. Oh man, are you sure? Craig nodded. Okay, he muttered, looking left to right. We'd better get out of here. Come on, let's go this way. Craig scrambled to his feet and ran after Jack. It was obvious that Jack knew the area, because he led them down a couple of side streets and then an alley without stopping to look. Craig kept looking behind them, but nobody appeared. Suddenly, he realized that they were in a dead end. Jack had stopped. He looked like he was staring at the wall in front of them. Was he looking for some secret passageway? Was he going to climb it? What are you doing? Craig asked Jack from behind. How will we get out of here? Jack made a noise that sounded like a cross between laughing and coughing. We won't, he answered. What do you mean? Jack turned around. Thick, brown hair was sprouting from his face. His body seemed to bulge out in strange places under his clothes. He held up a hand with razor-sharp claws. So, he rasped, you still don't believe in monsters?